my little sister, but when she gets home from school, there is no point in me even trying to finish my school. It is over. That's May's time. She comes in my room, she turns on my Xbox, and she plays Minecraft for the whole afternoon.
Yeah.
And I'm like, for real.
I googled my dad, and so it had like his business stuff come up, and then it had a weight loss.
Okay.
Oh, weight loss. It's my dad's. It was like health journey. That's hilarious. Pictures of it.
Alrighty, so let's go ahead and get started. Let me see. I think I've seen.
So I got my dad's truck the other day because my car stopped. My dad was trying to fix my car. So I took my dad's truck to go to school, and I love my dad's truck. By the way,
What kind of truck does he have?
he drives a Chevy Silverado 15.
Oh, that's
And I love it, and I want it. And
if I could drive
I
big
drove
cars,
it,
I would want to.
and his work call had transferred onto his radio. So I'm listening to his work call, and I'm thinking, what channel am I on? Because he's got one of those like fancy like computer, and like there's like a computer in the radio. Where, like, it transfers what he's listening to on his phone. Onto the things. I'm listening to whatever this lady talking about his work, and I'm thinking, what am I listening to? And then he had like a call with one of his friends. I think his name was Joel. And I was listening, I was eavesdropping on their conversation. And I was like, Dad, nothing's wrong with your radio.
Yeah, one time we were driving down the road, and my brother's was like on the phone. He was driving past my mom on the interstate, and his phone call connected to my mom's car. And my mom was like, "Wait, let me listen to this." I was like, "Mom, what the heck?" It's like, I'll make sure I never hook my Bluetooth up to your car because I know you'll just listen to my phone calls or my music or whatever.
I keep driving purposely to stay right next to you.
Yeah.
I'm supposed to exit, but I'm gonna stay right here.
Yeah. Like.
Yeah, one time I turned on my car and it started playing my mom's podcast.
Oh my gosh, every time my dad gets in my car, he feels the need to reprogram my radio to play his song, and I hate it. Because he listens to that, yacht rock radio or like the old 90s music, and I'm like, you've got to stop playing your Van Halen in my car because I'm dying. I want to listen to my stuff.
No, my dad doesn't like my stuff.
Yeah, my dad hates my
I
stuff.
wouldn't be
I'll
able to
even
adjust
listen
my
to
seat in my car because I
Yes,
can't.
my
I
dad
can't
gets so
drive that
mad.
by myself, and so
I
I
have to
drive
adjust
somewhere,
the seat.
and then
Oh.
they'll adjust.
My sister and I share a car.
Oh,
And she's 5'1" and I'm 5'4".
So my mom has a
So
car where
I've
you
gotten
can
to
just
the point where I
press the
just sit
button,
where she has.
Yeah.
and it's got the seat positions programmed into
My
it,
mom
so you
has a
just
car
have to press the button to move to your seat position.
I could not.
My mom has
That
that,
is-
but it's only for 2 people, so only my mom and dad are set.
But my dad gets so mad because he gets in, like when I mess with the seat and in his truck, he gets in the seat and he's crammed up against the steering wheel because I sit up real high. And he's like, why did you do that? Why can't you move the seat back? So he's got to fix it when he leaves for anything. Which I don't know why he would even get in this truck because he's going to say,
If I had to share a car with my brothers, I'd be so mad. But we all had to buy our own cars in my family, so.
yeah.
Yeah, my parents pay for the car, but we have to pay for insurance.
Oh,
But it's
yeah.
technically my parents' car, so we'll have to buy it from them if we want it eventually.
My dad's got this old truck just sitting in the driveway. It needs a new battery, but he won't sell it. He won't fix it. He won't do nothing with it. And I'm like, someone's gonna be driving soon, and he needs a car. So what are you gonna do? And that thing burns gas like nobody's business. It just goes straight through it, within about 20 minutes. You'll be driving down the road, and all of a sudden, oh, where did my gas go? It's gone. He used to take that thing to old car shows a long time ago. And I loved them when I was little.
Yeah, my dad used to bring me to them because my dad's a car geek.
Yeah, my dad is a car geek.
He'd go and he'd bring me to them. And that was always fun when I was little, but now I'm like,
You guys have your own cars.
I drive with my sister and I share a car.
Yeah.
But I have a
Okay, so this is taking forever. Let's
I have a
see.
Jeep Patriot. It's fun. I wanted a Wrangler, but Dad said there's no way I'm buying you a Wrangler. I was like, please buy me a Wrangler. He said, nope.
My sister has a Wrangler.
Lucky her.
It's like a 2001, but
Let's feel it.
it's nice. I like it, and it's manual. My car's I love it
Yeah.
so much. It's just, I like to shift gears. It
I-
makes me
I've
feel like
never-
I'm going faster.
As
Have you
soon as I
ever-
can get these sent over, we'll go ahead and get started, but.
I accidentally had
What
a
do we
friend
have
being
on
one of
Zoom?
them. It was terrifying.
Well, I was going ahead and recording because I guess I haven't heard from Victoria. I know David's out, so I don't know if they'll need to watch videos. So I just wanted to make sure to record it so they can log in and watch. But I'm trying to get the internet connection has been so slow today, and I cannot get it just to even pull this up to send an email. So hopefully, I need to email the papers to myself. I have them to go on the screen. Okay, so let's see if that finally pulled up. Nope. Okay, so today we're going to do our last little section. We just have a little bit of math to finish up with, and then we'll do our recap on math, and then we're going to start with reading. Hey, where's that? So let's see. We're going to talk about some strategies with that on how to help, kind of what are some things, because one of the things with reading that we're going to talk about is like the question order is in order with the passage. Now, when you get to the end of the passage, there may be some synthesis questions that are about the passage as a whole, but it's much easier, and one of the strategies that we'll be talking about is just reading part of the passage, answering part of the questions, reading the rest of the passage, answering the rest of the questions.
We were doing English, I find some of the hardest ones to do. We're trying to figure out where the paragraph went. Like,
Yeah.
where does this sentence go? Which
Yes.
paragraph does it follow?
I hate those
And I
questions.
was like, I don't know. I don't
So-
want to read everything.
So one of those things that you may try to do is, if you know that those are more difficult for you, and you know that that may be more of a challenge, then you may decide that those are ones that you want to guess and move on and go back to if you have time. Spend your time on the ones that you know for sure.
Yeah, that's what my dad was telling me about. Just do the ones that you know, and then come back to the
Yeah, and that's what, marking, and we're going to be talking about some annotation today. Come on, close out. We'll be talking about some different markings that you can use to annotate and to make a note to yourself, because a lot of times it'll be really easy to go, oh, I'll come back to this one time, but then you have time and you go back and go, which one was it? So you need to make a consistent way to mark what you need to go back to, so it'll jump out at you, so it won't take as much time, because that's our biggest thing is timing.
Yes.
And especially with reading, we only have 35 minutes to answer 40 questions. Yeah, and we have,
With math, my total time was 77 minutes.
okay.
So I was like really slow.
So that's going to be one of the things that you want to do as you're doing some practice, is trying to break it down, do shorter sections,
I did.
less
I
time.
broke it in 15-minute sections, and I took a break into each section.
Mhm.
And I came to it.
And then also identifying the ones that you're spending the most time on. See what you can speed up on, which ones were the easier ones to speed up on, and then which ones are you going to need more time. Let's see. This is just not going on at all, because I closed those out, and of course they did not save in the right places. Come on. Actually, we'll just do this. While I'm trying to get this to go, I don't know if it's internet, I don't know if it's my computer, but while I'm trying to pull this up, is there anything specific that you have questions about or anything that you have found as you've been working through these things? Is there anything in particular that you're finding challenging or that you?
I guess trying to pace myself and trying to figure out how to do things quicker and also be more accurate because I'm finding that I'm not very accurate.
Okay, so you're finding that a lot of your timing. What about content knowledge?
I'm finding that I'm not really understanding or some of the questions that I don't even understand what the question is asking at all. So.
Okay, so understanding, focusing more on what
And at that point,
understanding
I
the
would just
questions.
try to guess or reread the question and things like that. I wrote notes to myself like, what do you need to study on or get quicker at or better at in this test to make a better grade next time? And what did you miss and why did you miss that? And why did you take so long to complete the test? Like, what were you stuck on?
Good, good. So that analysis of what you're having trouble with is going to be the key to improving. Because once you figure out exactly what it is that you're having trouble with, then you're able to go back and focus in on that specific issue.
Yeah.
Versus trying to do everything as a whole all together, you're able just to focus on each thing piece by piece. And so
another thing that I think I did incorrectly was I procrastinated the test till a little while, and I know I shouldn't have done that.
Okay.
But then last night I tried to get it done, and I ended up finishing the test at like 9:30, so I got 48 out of 60 problems correct or incorrect. So I was kind of frustrated in myself.
Yeah. So so making sure, and one of the things that you always want to make sure that you're going in as rested as you can be as you're practicing, just to kind of help you do the best that you can.
And I went over the notes that we went over in class, and I read over them. And another thing that I think I should have done was make note cards on the information that was highlighted.
Okay, good. Yeah, just kind of figuring out those study methods, finding out what's going to be best. So this last section that we're going to finish up in math today is going to start with statistics and probability. And I think this is one that, to me, a lot of times can be kind of intimidating because statistics and probability just sounds like something that's going to be super difficult. But thinking about statistics just means working with numbers, being able to evaluate numbers, being able to look at the relationship between numbers, being able to organize the data to be able to get information from the data. Okay, so it's not really, don't be intimidated by words that are big. Okay, so it says statistics and probability questions ask about probabilities of events, interpretation of data distributions, data relationships, and data collection methods, as well as averages and medians. And so let me pull this up real quick. Share my screen so I can pull this up and we can look at it all together. Okay, so statistics and probability, we talked about the types of questions. The first one is probability. And so probability, again, is just the likelihood of something happening. So basically, in here it just says that where is my equation?
Weird.
I mean, that's the crazy, why does my equation not
It's
come?
printed on here.
I was gonna say y'all, this is just the kind of day it's been. But anyway, so at least you have it on your paper so you can see. So the probability of E, the E just means the probability of an event happening. The E means just whatever the event is that you're looking for. And so this is the number of desired outcomes over the total possible. So, for the love of all that's good, so basically the example I gave was drawing socks out of a drawer, and this is going to be silly, but so when I was in school, I remember I always said, like, the math I had to take was called Math for Elementary Teachers. And I remember that was my whole thing. And going to, you know, when I was going to college, I was going to pick the degree based on the least amount of math I had to take. So to do elementary education, I didn't even have to take Algebra 1. So I was like, yes, all I have to do is take Math for Elementary Teachers. And so I remember doing probability. And I was like, oh my gosh, are you kidding me? I was trying to get away from math. But anyway, for whatever reason, I just always remember doing probability. And the teacher that I had was just, he was, I don't know, he always had his Birkenstocks on. He was very laid back, hippie-like, but he would always do probability, always dealt with socks in a drawer. I don't know why. So I had to do a socks in a drawer. So I said, if a drawer contains 20 pairs of socks, 4 pairs white, 6 pairs black, 8 pairs blue. Okay. So it says the probability of reaching in the drawer and getting a pair of blue socks. So basically, my chance of blue socks is going to be 8. My total number of socks was 20, so 8 out of 20. Now remember, anytime I have a fraction, I need to express in simplest form. So I've got to reduce that, okay? So 8 out of 20 reduces to 2/5. So the probability is 2 out of 5, okay? If you want to know the probability of an event not occurring, you take the probability and subtract it from 1. So if I had the whole number 1, and I am right down here. So I would subtract it from 1, and 1 minus 8 over 20 is 12 over 20, because 12 of the 20 pairs of socks are not blue. Again, I would have to reduce that 12 over 20 to simplest form, which would be 3/5. Okay, so basically, if you're looking at the probability of something happening, you're looking at, okay, what is it that I'm looking to happen over what are the total possible outcomes in all? And then reduce that as a fraction. And then when I look at the chances of it not happening, then I'm going to subtract whatever my chances of it happening from 1, because probability is going to fall between 0 and 1. Okay, and we're going to talk about that in just a minute, about how if my probability is 0, that means it's not happening. Whereas if my probability is 1, that means it is happening for sure. Okay, but usually it's going to be somewhere between 0 and 1. And like I said, that's at the very bottom of the page. We'll look at that in a minute. 2 types of probability. The probability of one event or another from happening. So if I have a probability question that says, what's the probability of this or this happening? Okay, so the example we looked at a minute ago was one independent situation. So now I'm looking at, what if I'm looking at 2 situations, and I want to know what is the probability of this thing happening or of this thing happening. So if it's asking or, I know I'm going to add the 2 probabilities together. And so that's why I put in parentheses sum of events. So if my probability question says or, I know I need to find the probability of one thing happening, the probability of the second thing happening, and add them together. So the example I gave was, what if it was you wanted a pair of blue socks or black? The probability of black socks would be 6 over 20. Probability of blue would be 8 over 20. 6 over 20 plus 8 over 20 is going to give me 14 over 20. Then I would reduce that to simplest form, which would end up being 7/10. Okay, So I had to find the probability of black socks, the probability of blue socks, add them together, and then reduce. If I have a probability question that says and, okay, if I want to know if this thing could happen and this thing could happen, not or, but and, then it's the product of events. And what operation does the word product imply?
Division.
Not
Or
division, multiplication. I have my product as my answer in a multiplication problem, okay? So if I see probability of this and this happening, I take the two individual probabilities, so just like I had 6/20 or 6/20 and 8/20, and I multiply them together. So 6 times 8 is 48, but remember, numerator by numerator, denominator by denominator. So you would end up with 48 over 400, which you would have to reduce to 3/25. Okay? So or, add them together, and multiply them. And like I said, probability goes between 1 and 0, or 0 and 1. 0 is going to be, if you end up with a calculation, you have a 0 in your numerator. So that's at the very bottom. I have the example of 0 over 5 equals 0. Okay, so if there's 0 chances of something happening out of 5, then I know it's a 0 probability. Likewise, if I end up with the same number in the numerator and denominator, I know if I have 4 chances of it happening out of a total of 4 chances, 4 divided by 4 is 1, so I know it's 100% chance that it's going to happen, okay? So being able to know that if I'm calculating probability and I have a 0 in my numerator, my probability is 0. If I have the same number in the numerator and denominator, then my probability is 1, which is equal to 100%. Okay, so that's all on statistics and probability. Sounds really super complicated, but it's just, working with that. The next thing after probability, we're looking at sets of numbers. So sometimes we have sets of numbers, and it'll give us, the brackets or parentheses, and it'll give me a set of numbers, and it'll say to find either the average, the median, or the mode. Okay, so the average. Think about, a lot of these things you started learning in pre-algebra or before. Average, I add up my total numbers and divide by the number of numbers I added together, okay? So that's finding my average. Know that also it could say find the mean of the numbers or the arithmetic mean. All of those mean average, okay? And just kind of a way that I think I've mentioned before is if you talk about your mean average, okay? Because sometimes your grade is not so good, you go, ooh, my average is mean. I don't know, that's just kind of a silly way to remember average and mean. The next is median. We've talked about how the median is the middle of the road. And so when you're driving down the interstate, you've got that median that separates the two lanes of traffic going the opposite direction. So median means middle, but you have to make sure that you have put them in order from least to greatest to be able to calculate that. Don't just look at your set of numbers and assume that they're in order. Make sure they're in order first and then find the middle. The mode is the most commonly occurring value in the set of numbers, so it's the one that repeats the most. Okay, mode and most is another way to remember that one. Sometimes it could be what's called bimodal, and that means you have 2 modes. Okay, you've got 2 numbers that repeat the same number of times. I didn't put that on here, but I just wanted to mention that. All right, my next section is dealing with charts. When charts are used in ACT Math, you must look at the title of the charts and the descriptions of the data being compared on the X and Y axes. So when I'm dealing with a chart, and like I said, X and Y axes, just like when I'm graphing. Okay, remember my y-axis is what goes, up and down. X goes from right to left. And so I'm looking at what I'm comparing. So in this one, I'm comparing types of supplies or numbers of supplies to types of supplies. Okay, so it kind of, we see the title at the top, so I know what my graph is about, and I can see what I'm comparing. In the book I was using, they call them column charts, but typically this is something we learn in, pre-algebra and before as a bar graph. And it shows dependent results per independent variables. So basically, my results depend on what item I'm comparing. Okay, so if I was talking about pencils, my number of pencils is dependent on the type of school supply that I'm looking for, or my number of items are dependent on the different types of supplies. The next one is a line chart, and we can see that our line chart compares, but the main thing is when we see that line, it helps us have a visual representation that emphasizes a trend. I can see what the trend is. Is my trend going up? Is my trend going down? Do I see that it's real rocky and it's up, down, up, down, up, down? You know, so that's going to be the main thing that you can tell about a line chart. The next one, bar chart, is like a column chart except for it's horizontal instead of vertical. Okay, so basically your X and Y axes are reversed. So you're looking, you know, you're still comparing things, but again, you always want to look and make sure you know what is being compared to one another. And then finally,
The Y at the top left, and then the X is the
So-
line across.
so in the typical, like in this one, so in the charts that we looked at, like looking at this one first, okay, we have our Y-axis, which is our up and down,
Right.
and our X is left and right. Okay, so that's why our bars go upward. Okay, so in this situation, so basically, if this was what my line graph or my bar graph looks like, then when I get to the bar chart, I've just flipped it.
Okay.
Okay,
So
so
this would be
now,
X
you know,
and
we've
this
got
would be
X
Y.
then Y. And again, that's not necessarily something to get hung up on. It's just kind of a description thing here, but basically you're, you know, it's helping you to compare items, dependent and independent events. And then finally the pie chart. Sometimes you may see a pie chart that represents, that has numbers on it, that would add up to be your total. So on this one, we've got cars, buses, motorbikes, and vans, okay? And then the other one, sometimes you may see percentages. And just know that always, if it's representing percentages, it's always going to total up to be 100%, okay? Now, one of the things you could also look at is on a circle graph or on a pie chart, if it's 100 degrees, I mean, if it's 100%, in geometry, think about geometry, a circle. How many degrees is a circle equal to? 360 degrees. So if I wanted to find out what degree each percentage represented, then basically like here, 23%, I could multiply 0.23 by 360 to find, okay, what would my degree of that slice be, okay? So just something to kind of know about pie charts. And then the last page I have is just kind of a recap of ACT Math Prep. The first thing was to use your goal score and average scale score conversion chart to help you to determine how many correct answers you need to have to reach your goal score, okay? Depending on where you want that goal score to be, it can kind of relieve some pressure if you know that, hey, I'm not trying to get 60 out of 60 questions right, okay? By saying, hey, I know I need to get this one, now also recognizing that you may make some mistakes. So let's say if you say, hey, I know I need to get 45 of them correct, then you really want to kind of have your target be 50 of them correct, because you're still going to make some mistakes. So, you know, but it, like I said, it helps you to kind of get an idea of how many could I skip. And if you want to kind of keep a tally mark, you know, somewhere on, you know, on your booklet or something of knowing how many skips you've had, then that kind of helps you keep track. Have you skipped more than you needed to skip? So you know you need to go back and check some. Or, hey, I've got plenty of skips left. I haven't skipped anything I've done so far. I've done well so far. So I can just skip this one and move on and not waste my time on it, okay? So knowing what your goal score is, having an idea of what that average scale score looks like, and remember that is going to come from the big red book, okay? So the red book is going to be where there's going to be, 5 scaled scores in there that you can use to kind of help you see that there's kind of an average for each goal and each score. Use your booklet as scratch paper. Don't be afraid to write in your booklet. Mark it up, okay? Label diagrams that are given to help you better understand a diagram. Set up equations, write things out right in that booklet, okay? Save time by circling answers in the booklet and then transfer them to your answer sheet before you turn to the next page. So go ahead and know that you're going to do these, you know, when you open your book, do this page, circle your answers, and then transfer right before you turn your page. Do not rely too heavily on your calculator. Don't sit and work every single problem out on the calculator. There are going to be some things that you can do quicker in your head or by jotting down on paper. But also make sure you know how to use that calculator before going into it. The last thing you want to do, especially the TI-30, where you have to do like function this, or you have to do second and then hit a number to get it to do what you want it to do. Make sure you know how to work that.
It was, we had to like figure out how to check our
Yeah.
graphs.
Mhm.
How did you do this again?
Yes, and so make sure, first of all, make sure that it's an approved calculator, because graphing calculators are not allowed. Make sure you have an approved calculator and make sure you know how to use it, but don't overuse it, okay? It's a time sucker, okay? So try to, whatever you can do on paper in your head, do that, and then save your calculator for the ones that are bigger number calculations that it would take you longer to write them out. If you encounter a problem that you are somewhat familiar with but unsure how to work it, try to plug in the answers and back into your answer, okay? So if you go, yeah, I remember how to do this, but I'm not quite sure, try to plug in an answer and try to, and like I said, we talked about how your A, B, C, D, E choices, they're typically going to be in order from least to greatest. So if you start with C and you plug it in, if that ends up being too much, you can back down to A and B. Or if C is not enough, you can bump up to D and E. Okay, so plug it in using the answers that you've been given to try to back into it by plugging them in. If you don't know how to work a problem and can't back into the answer, don't waste your time. Guess and move on. Practice, practice, practice. Okay, familiarize yourself with the types of math covered on the test. Use your practice test to determine if your pacing is an issue, and if it is it due to working too slowly, or is it due to not knowing the material? If it's due to working too slowly, set those time goals, keep practicing with smaller time periods, and decrease your time with each practice test. If it's due to content knowledge, seek the help of a tutor. So if it's something that you just either don't know or don't remember, those are two totally different things. Something that you've never learned how to do, definitely you can get a tutor and get somebody to teach you how to do that. Now, is it going to be something that's going to stick with you for the test? I don't know. But if it's something that you have learned previously how to do and you just don't remember, that's going to be a lot quicker to conquer than learning brand new material. Again, your goal is going to determine, are you going to need to learn new material, or is it just going to be a brush up? Because are you trying to get, a 30, 32 for scholarships, or are you just trying to get a certain score to get in? It's going to depend on what you're looking for, okay? So with the math, like I said, setting up, doing some flashcards, just doing some practice problems, focus on the skills that you are the least familiar with, the ones that give you the most trouble. Flipping through those tests in your book. Don't be afraid to open that red book and go through it. You don't have to open it only every time that you're going to do a practice test. Go through it and say, hey, I'm going to look at, practice tests 3 and 4 today, and I'm just going to look at the types of math that I see. I'm going to look at it and go, hey, I know how to do that. I know how to do that. Ooh, I don't know what that is. Circle it and say, okay, this is something I know I need to practice with. By looking at actual test questions will help you not to be so fearful of them when you actually see them on the real test, okay? All right, so like I said, any questions about the math test? Okay, so if you have not been able to finish up by doing a second math practice test, then that's one of the things that I want you to focus on, trying to get done pretty quickly. So you can kind of know where you stand with it all, okay? So this week is the end of 8 weeks, okay? This is a 16-week class, so we're halfway through. The good news is we're kind of pacing ahead, so we have finished, we're halfway through, and we have now finished English and math. That means we've got reading and science to deal with in the remaining, and then just kind of the test as a whole. So my hope is math is kind of heavy because it's a lot of information. It's the longest test. It's the time-wise, and so there's a lot of content to be covered. So reading we should go through pretty quickly and pretty easily. Science will be one that can be a little more challenging because of the graphs and the charts and things like that. So, all right, so we will go ahead. Huh?
Are they doing that thing where you can go in and you can take one test?
Okay,
When does
so
that start?
it was supposed to have started in September, but COVID
Yeah.
messed up everything.
Yeah, that's what I thought it was
Yeah.
supposed to start already.
It was supposed to have started in September, but COVID, so basically what the way they had it set up, the plan was, there's several things that had to fall in place for that to happen.
Yeah.
Number one was that you have to have taken a full battery or a full test.
Yeah.
You have to take the full test at least once and have an overall score. Then you could go in and retest only
One
for
test.
one subject.
See, that's nice, because I've already taken the full test, and I didn't take it, like, for my actual score. I just took it just
Right.
to, like, take
Right.
the test, you know, and, like, look at it.
Yeah.
And so, like, that's kind of nice, because I feel like I would be able to focus better if I went in for just math or just one subject.
Now, the other thing that I'm not sure of, I want to say that I had heard, and I need to verify this, it was my understanding, though, that to retest on one subject only, it had to be a test center that I believe that it was electronic only, but it was not a paper written test, that it would be a computer-based test. And so that was how, when I went through the training, so when I went through the training, all of my tests were computer-based. So when I did my ACT for my training, I had to do it on the computer, and it was very different.
Yeah.
You do get paper for scratch paper, so you have something you can write on. So, you know, in that sense, you know, you still have something to write on. You still have somewhere to work it out. You still have the computer. I mean, you have your calculator. A good thing is that as far as your timing goes, there's a time bar, so you can see your time. So it'll tick down and you can see it. And then also it does pause as it's changing pages. So you're not counted off time as if the computer hangs up or whatever. So those are some benefits to it.
Yeah, I like that.
So the math to me is not a big deal computer based.
So like when you're doing the test, you can see the time.
Yes.
That's kind of scary.
The reading and the
I like
English
that.
really messed me up.
When I did the first English test, I got kind of panicked because I saw the time ticking and draining while I was working, and I couldn't concentrate.
Yeah.
That was the one thing I.
Yeah. You don't
Yeah, I feel like
want to
reading,
lose
because
focus.
I have to, like, follow along, like,
Right.
my eyes don't, like,
Yeah.
I have, like, messed up eyes.
And we're going to be talking about tracking text. Is going to be something that's going to be super helpful with the reading. And so that was the thing about the computer based. Math was not a big deal because you've got a problem and you've got your answer choices, and if you need to work something out, and it was the kind of thing where you just clicked on your answer as you went. You know, so you're clicking answers, so you don't have time issues of transferring answers to an answer document.
When you take the ACT, like if you're not taking it on the computer, like on paper, is it like a bubble in? Like you have to bubble in?
Yeah, so like in your red book, I'll show you. So in this book, at the beginning of the practice test, this is the sample answer sheet. Okay.
So you have an answer sheet.
Yes, so you actually have this answer sheet that is going to be for each subject. You've got math, reading, English, math, reading, and science. So this is where you're bubbling your answers. So like I said, it's so you don't get distracted when you're going question, answer, question, answer. It's easier just to bubble in a block at a time before you turn the page, because it is kind of tiny. You know, but this, so you have your actual bubble sheet that's going to be laying over to the side, and you've got your booklet sitting here. Whereas the computer-based test, you just click on your answer and move on. There are some, with the computer-based test, there are some things like it has a little flag. You can flag a question instead of writing a question mark, and you can it off to the side. It kind of tells you what items you flagged to be able to click back to, you know, if you have time, you
Did
can
they,
go
like,
back and
tell
check
you
those.
all that stuff before you take the test too, since it's kind of a new thing?
I do not know that answer.
Did they tell you when you did that, or
No.
you just had to find out?
Yeah. So it's the kind of thing where right now, as far as computer-based testing, so for a center or wherever to have computer-based testing, that means that the place, so let's say you're going to go take it at Spain Park High School. That means you're having to take it in a room where they provide the computers, And so whatever location, whatever school has to be able to provide you a computer. They can't allow you just to bring your own in
Yeah.
because they don't know what you're going to go to
Yeah.
and stuff like that. So there's a lot of things that go into the computer-based testing in our area. As of right now, I'm not familiar with any places that are computer-based.
Yeah.
So that's why right now I'm focusing on paper only. And also, you will always have an option of computer-based
Yeah.
versus paper. So, so until it's like pretty much all computer-based right now, I'm trying to focus more on the paper strategies because the
Yeah.
strategies will be so different. Because that was doing the reading and the English was so different because your screen can only hold so much content.
Yeah.
So you're having to scroll up and scroll down trying to find things, whereas a piece of paper you're looking over and I might have underlined something, I might have done something, where you have a highlight tool, you can highlight and stuff like that. But again, you gotta know how to use it. And it's got to be something that doesn't take you a ton of time and doesn't eat up your time trying to mark up the test.
When you take the
So-
actual test, do you have to like, can you use the actual test to mark on? Or do you have-
Absolutely,
Yeah,
right.
I didn't know that until
all
the
over
last
it.
test.
Yes.
Yeah.
Last couple of
So like
questions
when you're
on
taking the
that.
actual test, you don't have to have scratch piece of paper. You can use it all on the test.
So you cannot have scratch paper
Okay.
with a paper test. Your booklet is your scratch paper.
That was
So-
bad for me. I took the whole math test. I was like,
Bless
this
you.
is so bad. I was like, I'm trying to do all this stuff in my head.
Yes.
I looked up like halfway through the test and I saw people writing stuff down. I was like,
Yes, right all over
Yeah.
it.
and then I started writing things.
Mark
down.
Because
it
like I'm a very
gosh.
visual learner
Yes.
person, so I have to write every little step down like I'm doing an equation. Like it's hard for me to keep things in my head. Like I have to write everything down.
So, you know, so yes, definitely. And we'll go ahead and kind of take a look at our reading overview and kind of look at how, you know, there are going to be some things that are going to be similar between the different subjects, just like I told you guys, you know, the transferring of the answers. That's something I would do consistently, no matter if it's, you know, English, math, reading, or science. Page of answers, bubble in, turn the page. As far as the reading overview, okay, so it says ACT reading test consists of 40 questions to be answered in 35 minutes. It's broken into 4 sections, each followed by 10 questions, so that gives you about 8 minutes and 45 seconds per section, okay? 3 of the sections are made up of one long prose passage. Prose just means non-writing. Prose is like just writing, okay? So anyway, a lot of, you know, don't let that word freak you out. Prose doesn't mean anything fancy. And a 4th section presents 2 shorter passages, often called the paired passages, okay? So basically, for 3 sections, you're going to have 1 passage. For 1 section, you'll have paired passages. And in those paired passages, you're going to do some comparing and contrasting, okay? So you've got to know some details about each of them to be able to tell how they're alike, how they're different. It may be that you're telling the viewpoints of the author, how they're alike, how they're different, things like that. So each passage falls into one of 4 categories. You have a literary narrative, humanities, social science, and natural science. Okay, there's no specific order of passages, and the paired passages may be any of the 4. I think I wrote that wrong, meaning that the order of the passages, like it won't be the 3 long ones and then the paired. It could be a paired one and then 3 long ones. It could be a long one, a paired one, and then 2 long ones. So they will always go in order as far as literary narrative, humanities, social science, and natural science. They will always go in that order, but you don't know if it's going to be the 1 long or if it's going to be the 2 comparison for that thing. So I need to reword that sentence because that makes it sound like it could be just presented willy-nilly. Literary narrative. These passages are actually taken from novels or short stories. It's not any kind of made up something. They've actually taken it from some type of literature, okay? And it'll tell you what it's from and when it was written and all that stuff. So a lot of times it's good to kind of glance at it to see what kind of passage it's from. Also, it will help you to see when it was written to know the time period. Is it something that's going to be fairly modern, or is it something that was written in the 1800s? You know, what is your time period on that to help you kind of know what you're getting into? No poetry, no scripts, okay? So no play scripts or anything like that. These passages typically include 2 or 3 characters and focus on characterization developed by the dialogue, actions, and thoughts relayed by the narrator.
So basically, these are your, these are your little fiction stories or whatever that are going to tell a story about some characters. There may be some conflict, but it does not, it's because it's an excerpt of a passage or an excerpt of a book or whatever, you're not going to have that full storyboard kind of thing where you've got the intro and then you've got the climax and the resolution, where you've got all of that. Like I said, it may include some conflict, but you're not going to have total resolution. So it may end in a cliffhanger. It may just give you a piece of it and it's just a piece of it. You have no resolution. But it says, although dynamics between the characters may be revealed, there is little action that occurs and the characteristics do not go through dramatic changes during the passage, okay? So it's just basically a little story. Sometimes people find these more difficult to deal with because these are going to be some of these main ideas, some of these synthesis, some of these inferencing, some of these things that we have to, look at what happened with the characters and we have to make inferences based on, things like that. Humanities and social sciences. Humanities is one, social sciences is another. They're two different types of, two different passages, but they're very similar, so that's why they're together here. These passages tend to address the relationships people have with the people and the world around them and their shared history. Humanities passages range from memoirs to articles written about people or events. Social science passages cover topics such as politics, architecture, and sustainability. Sustainability is just the avoidance of depletion of natural resources to maintain an ecological balance. When we talk about, sustaining the materials of the earth or whatever. Both humanities and social science passages are very structured. They are essay format. So kind of when you think about when you're writing an essay, you typically have your introduction and your conclusion and then your three bodies, okay? Go ahead and take a break and we'll come back. Sure. It seemed like a very short, well, really, it should have been, isn't it? No, it's 11:10, so it was just late ringing. That's what it is. Okay. 'Cause I was gonna say, that was not 5 minutes.
Burning out there.
Oh,
It's like melted crowns or like pizza or something.
one or the other.
Yeah.
Neither of them you want to eat. You don't want the burnt pizza or the melted crab.
Mm-mm.
When I was little, I thought that candles were edible.
Oh, no.
And for my birthday, I tried to eat them.
Man, scented chapstick was the, I mean, that was,
Cinnamon chapstick.
no, scented chapstick was
Oh.
always the biggest disappointment
Yes.
because like you'd smell it and be like, oh, like taste it and go,
Yeah, my sister and I used to eat chopstick in our backyard.
mm-hmm.
You used to
It was
eat
this
it in your
one
backyard.
kind.
Yeah, we said why your backyard.
Did y'all have the kind that it was like a little glass tube or whatever and it had the roller ball and it was like a lip gloss?
Yes.
And you would
When
like try to
I-
lick
little
it
circles
and
on
like I would try to, we'd always pop the little ball out of it to try to drink it. Oh, it was terrible.
Oh my gosh, that's funny.
All those things. Okay, so back to our different types of passages. We talked about the literary narrative. Humanities and social sciences are going to be about people, places, things like that. They are going to have a specific structure to them, introductory, conclusion, and then those supporting paragraphs in the middle. And then natural science passages. And these passages, the same certain structure, begin by describing a topic that a study that it's a scientific problem to be examined or evaluated. The introduction and initial body paragraphs describe the knowledge that existed before the experiment or invention that is being described, and the key terms are defined. Later paragraphs summarize studies that have been completed and the views of various scientists or the outcomes of the experiments. So instead of kind of that introduction, body, and conclusion, you've got kind of before the experiment that we did, here's what we did, and then the resulting kind of thing from it. Science passages may go into depth about experiments. Some may summarize the theories of different scientists. Others may deal with obstacles that made the topic difficult to study. Once a scientist is introduced by first and last name, then throughout the rest of the passage, it's only going to refer to the scientist's last name. The conclusion paragraph usually discusses further studies that could be performed, the limitations of the current data, or the application of the most recent data that's been discovered. Passages will sometimes end with a reflection of the scientific discovery. The 4 passages do not have to complete it in order that they appear in your test. So, because if you have preference for a certain type of passage, you can change them up. You know, just because literary narrative is first, if it's your least favorite thing to do and you like the science one, go to the science one first. Do it, because more than likely, if it's going to be a topic that you are more comfortable with and that you enjoy more, you're going to do better on it. So if you maximize your time that way, because usually you're going to spend more time on something that you do not understand and that you do not like. So because you enjoy the ones, you're going to go through those, get them done first, so you can work these in any order that you want to. Because you know that they're going to be in a certain order, then work them out of order if you want to. My OCD self, I have trouble with that because I need to do this one, then this one, then this one, then this one. It just kind of rattles me to change them up. But if that's what you want to do, that is just fine. It is okay. Reading study plan. Okay, so in the beginning, don't worry about your timing when you're doing your practice test, but focus more on becoming familiar with the types of passages that you find that you prefer and what types of questions are asked for each type of passage. So kind of doing the beginning of it, you're really trying to learn about the test. As you continue to practice, take time tests using strategies you learn to seek the answer from the passage. You should only use about 3 to 4 minutes reading the passage and the rest of the 8 minutes and 45 seconds per passage that you have answering the questions. Okay, so that's really kind of the best situation. In a minute, we will be talking about different strategies and stuff, and it's going to give another breakdown where if you use more time for reading, then you've got to be much more fluent and understand the questions, the types of questions that are being asked to be able to answer those questions faster. But the main thing is being able to quickly but effectively go through the reading and answering the questions. Develop a consistent method of marking up the passages. So yes, write in your book to identify important information and to note your thoughts and connections. Cross out non-answers so you can focus on possible answers without the others as distractions. So as you're going through your list of questions and you see one answer that is not the answer, mark it out. Then that way, as you're focusing on the questions that could be the answer, you're not distracted by the non-answers. You will also need to determine a method of marking questions that you're not sure are correct, so you can go back and check them if time allows. When checking your answers, make sure you consider the passage as a whole and justify your answer to yourself, saying, I'm going to choose this answer because I know blah, 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 blah. Do not practice by reading aloud because you cannot read out loud at the test. So when you're practicing for the ACT, especially the reading portion, don't read it out loud as you're practicing. Because if you're reading out loud, then you're going to need that strategy, when you're taking the test, and it may mess you up. Okay, reading skills for the ACT reading test. The first one is skimming. Skimming involves reading quickly with low levels of comprehension. You're just kind of going through, okay, da, 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 da. You're not really taking any information. The structured format of humanities and social science and natural science passages are going to be more, they're going to be more conducive to this type of skill, knowing that the first and last sentences of the paragraphs are typically the most important sentences of a paragraph, and that the introduction and conclusion of a passage give the framework for the content, then that helps you when you're skimming. So if you know that you're dealing with one of these structured passages and you just kind of skim over the first and last sentence of each paragraph, but then the first paragraph of the passage and the last paragraph of the passage, you focus on those, then it's going to kind of help you as you're moving quickly. So the first one is skimming. While you're skimming, you want to scan for the main idea or the conclusion. The main idea of a passage can usually be found in the introduction or the conclusion of a passage. There are certain transition words that help you to draw a conclusion, establish a cause and effect relationship, or emphasize a point. Sentences that synthesize information or draw conclusions can be helpful when you're trying to determine the main idea. So I've put a list of transition words in here that can help you find the main idea. If it's a cause and effect, you may see something that says accordingly, or as a result, or as such, because, consequently, ergo, for, hence, thus, therefore, since, and so. So it's saying this happened, so then this happened. So cause and effect. If it's an emphasis, if they're trying to emphasize something clearly, especially, in fact, in particular, indeed, however, nonetheless, notably, regardless, still, and though. Conclusion, in summary, in total, all things considered, those are going to be some keys to help you know that, okay, here comes the conclusion. So you looking for those transition words can help you to identify the main idea of the passage. There are also transitions that indicate repetition. So if you're reading and you see something that says, in fact, da, 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 and it's just repeating what you've already read, don't take time to reread that. Or if it says in other words, and for example, and stuff like that, then the author a lot of times wants to reiterate what they're saying, and all they're doing is restating information that you've already learned. So by skipping over that, you can get through that faster, but without missing out on necessary information. Topic sentences are usually the first sentence of the paragraph in the passage and give you the general framework of the content of the full passage. Always pay close attention to the introduction and conclusion of the passage carefully. So we've told you kind of some things about skimming. We're looking at the first and last sentences. We're looking at the first paragraph and the last paragraph. We're looking for these transition words. We are trying to move as quickly as possible. We are not really retaining much of the information. We are not comprehending very well in this situation. The next is scanning. Scanning is the process of looking for specific information as your eyes move across the text. Using your finger to scan can also be helpful to focus on smaller portions of the text at a time. Finger, pencil, whatever you want to use to track the text. This is especially useful when you're looking for specific words, phrases, or dates. So if you have a question that says, when did they do this? And you're trying to say, okay, which order did this happen first or did this happen? Just kind of scan through and you're just kind of briefly going under the words, trying to find a specific thing to go, okay, here's where my answer is. Because one of the things about the reading is most of the questions are told specifically and explicitly in the reading passage. Okay? You're not going to have to do a lot of guessing and what do you think would happen or whatever. If it's not told specifically in the passage, then you can assume that it's a wrong answer. Okay? Improving your speed. Sorry, I didn't finish up scanning. Scanning specific information, use your text, you can use pencil, looking for a specific word, phrase, or date. Scanning can be also useful for looking for similarities and differences by looking at comparative or superlative adjectives. So looking for better, best, more, most, oldest, smartest, any of those words, trying to find how to compare information. Scanning is not helpful when trying to identify big picture questions such as the main idea or if a line reference has already been made. So sometimes in the reading passage, it'll say in paragraph so-and-so, line so-and-so, what did the author mean, or what is another word that means blah, blah, blah. So sometimes it'll tell you specifically where to look and what specifically you're looking at. Improving your speed reading. Number one, stop sub-vocalizing, and that just means reading out loud. Reading out loud, a lot of times if we're reading out loud, we are focused on how we are pronouncing the word versus reading the word. And so a lot of times that's why a lot of people don't like to read out loud. And so especially when you're little kids in school, you can read better in your head than you can when it comes out of your mouth because you're more focused on saying the word correctly. Therefore, it's going to take more time. The next step is seeing groupings of words. So instead of looking at each word individually, kind of let your eyes kind of look at 3 words at a time to kind of do a grouping of words, and that's going to help you go a little bit faster. Use your finger or pencil to track the text. Okay, that's going to help you to focus and not get as distracted. The next thing is annotating, and so I put in here some recommended things to use to mark up the text. Okay. A star or an asterisk to mark the thesis or the main idea. An equal sign can be used to indicate similarities or equivalent concepts. An X can mean no or not. Okay, so if it's not something, put an X on it. Putting an arrow can show cause and effect. A plus sign means that if you found details supporting an idea or evidence in favor of a position, you could use the plus sign. But if it's evidence against an idea, or something that goes against a position, then you could use a minus sign. A question indicates, if you're confused about something or if it's one you need to go back to using that question mark. An exclamation mark, if you find something surprising or as you're kind of going through when you say, hey, I think this is going to be some important information, you can put that exclamation mark there to kind of identify that, hey, this is something that might be important. You can use brackets or braces or underline to help you identify important information. And then also circling keywords or transition words, things that you might need to refer back to later. Circle them so you can see them and go back to them very quickly. Test taking strategies. The first one, invest most of your time in answering the questions. Like I said, reading the passages within a couple of minutes and then using 5+ minutes to answer questions is going to be the best way because that gives you more time to process and look for the information in the text because you look back to the text to look for your information. Or you may decide you want to take more time reading, understand it better, and then try to go at the answers. So that's totally up to you. Another strategy is saving your worst passage until the end. Like I said, if a lot of people, the paired passages, they'll save to the end because you've got to understand both passages to be able to tell how they're alike and how they're different. So a lot of people like to do the single passages first and then do paired passages last because it takes them more time. Again, totally up to you and your preference. Use the order of the questions to your advantage. The earlier questions tend to focus on the introduction of the passage And the later questions will focus on the conclusion. So doing that, in a minute, we'll talk about how, reading half, answering questions, because they're typically going to go in order together. That makes it a little bit easier. Worry less about each individual answer. Don't take time trying to justify your answer. Just mark your answer if you know it's the right one, or mark out the ones that you know are wrong ones to be able to jump to the answer. Vary your reading pace based on the type of passage. Knowing the ones that you can read faster is helpful. Knowing the ones you need to take a little more time is helpful. So in that sense, after you do a practice test and you score it, you can look and see, hey, did I do better on this one because I understood it better because it's this type of passage? Or was it the science one and I didn't understand the jargon and it was really confusing and I got hung up on that? Kind of looking to see based on what the type of passage is. Know that you're going to need to vary your reading pace. The next one, like I said, reading half of the passage and answering half of the questions. Then read the other half and answer the questions. This is helpful, especially if you have trouble retaining all the information. If skimming or scanning the passage, if you have trouble remembering the information, then it's going to be better to read half, answer half, and then read the other half and answer the other half, because then you don't have as much information to retain. Again, doing the ACT, you're not trying to learn. You're not trying to save this information for you to use at a future time. This is a here and now kind of thing. You're just trying to get through it to do. Another thing, another strategy, answer the easy questions first. Some students struggle with higher order thinking questions, so answer the easy questions first. The ones that you can just go to the text and say, hey, I'm looking for this. There it is. There's my answer in the text. That's my answer. Pay attention to questions that say accept or not, okay? So one of the strategies can be to circle those words. If in the question it says, the character felt blah, 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 all of these except which one, then you know that those answers, you're looking for 3 that are going to be similar and 1 that is going to be the oddball, okay? So paying attention to accept and not. Circle those words so you don't just jump over them, because a lot of times we'll miss that and we'll find the first answer that's true and we answer that one, but we forget or we miss the fact that 3 of them are actually true, but you're looking for the one that is not. Okay, common wrong answer types. Okay, so basically when they're making these tests, obviously there's one right answer. Okay, so they have to sit down and come up with 3 non-answers. So as they're making the test, they have to say, okay, how can I make an answer that might throw them off or might make them think that that's the answer versus the correct one? Okay, no, there are a lot of people go, they're trying to trick you. No, they're not trying to trick you. They have to provide answers, and if they give 3 answers that could not possibly be, and then, the correct answer is standing there blinking lights and flashing, then that's not necessarily assessing your ability to answer the question. The main thing to know that if there is anything wrong, a partly wrong answer is a wrong answer, okay? Your answer ain't going to be partly true but partly wrong. If there's anything at all that is incorrect about your answer, mark it off. It could have, it could say this and this are happening. Well, if this one thing did happen but this one thing did not, then that is not your answer, okay? So if it's partly wrong, mark it out. Answers that echo the passage's wording. So sometimes there may be an answer that the wording flows along with what the passage was like, but the content of the information is not right, okay? So it may sound like it was, it goes along with it, but if you actually look at what it's actually saying, it is not correct. Answers that contradict the passage. So a lot of times, especially when we're reading something so fast, if we run across something that's kind of similar to it, our brain goes, hey, here's a connection, but you've got to look at it, and is it a connection saying that they are similar, or is it a contradiction? And sometimes we'll get hung up on that. So be careful about contradicting answers, because it might remind us of the passage, but in actuality, it's telling the opposite of what we read. Flipping relationships is another thing. So sometimes an incorrect answer choice will flip the relationship between characters or ideas between scholars. So let's say that you read an article and let's say it was 2 scientists that studied moon rocks. I don't even know, I'm just making this up. So 2 scientists studied moon rocks, and we have scientist A that says moon rocks are made of blah, 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 and scientist B says moon rocks are made of something else. But then in the answer, they say, oh, B said it was this, and they actually use the material that A thought. So they'll flip-flop what goes with what. Okay, so be careful of that, because you may go, oh, was it that or was it that? They may flip-flop of who went with what. Agreeable answer choices aren't always right. Okay, so maybe it says agreeable answers may be widely accepted ideas, but if it's not directly stated in the passage, don't assume what you think that person would think or say or do. Okay, don't, because it's what you think they would do, make sure it's in the text. And then lastly, your reaction in the situation rather than the character's reactions. So think about, a lot of times if we read something, especially literary narrative, if you're reading something and you think about how the character's reacting to something and you think about how you would react. So let's say, I think one of the examples I read was like, if you're in a store, okay, so this was something that was always horrifying to me when I was growing up. Like, my mom was always a big stickler, like if we went shopping and there was a sign that said this is so many percentages off or whatever, and even if it was in the wrong place and she went to check out and they didn't give her the discount, then she was pitching a fit, and it was go get the manager, I want to talk to somebody, and I would just be mortified. So if I was reading a passage and here's a kid who's gone to the store and the mom's pitching a fit to a manager, I might automatically assume that that person is going to feel mortified just like I did. Okay, so a lot of times we try to put our own feelings and reactions on a character based on what's happening to them in the story. But again, if the text does not tell you that they reacted this way, felt this way, thought this thing, be real careful not to put your thoughts and reactions and feelings. Does that make sense? Because a lot of times as we read, we kind of make those connections. We're taught to do that. Make connections as you read. Understand how you would feel in this situation. Understand, connect it to something you've experienced, that kind of stuff. So you're just looking for what is specifically there. Okay. So what I want to do now, we've got some time left. We may actually finish up a little bit early today, but what I want to do is I want to, where was that test? I have it on here. Okay. So this was a practice test that we had looked at some different sections. We're going to go. Okay. So looking at the reading test. Okay. So again, and this is going to be kind of hard for you to see, but let's look at the directions. Okay. There are several passages in this test. Each passage is accompanied by several questions. After reading a passage, choose the best answer to each question and fill in the corresponding oval on your answer document. You may refer to the passages as often as necessary, then you can flip back. Okay. So you can see passage 1, prose. Prose fiction. Remember, prose just means something that's written not in a specific order. It can be, it's not, it doesn't have to follow a certain pattern, that kind of thing. That's all that prose means. So it says prose fiction. This passage is adapted from the novel The Ground Beneath Her Feet by Salman Rushdie in 1990, and it's copyright 1999. Okay, so you can see here that when you know what you're reading, we're reading a fiction passage that was written in 1999. Okay, so with these, it's a story. Okay, literary narratives, you're going to need to read the story. You can't just scan and read the first and last paragraph. But one of the things that's good about this one is this may be one that you are reading part and answering part, okay? So I'm going to look at the questions before we actually look at the reading. It says the passage as a whole can primarily be characterized by the narrator's something. Well, I haven't even looked at the passage, so I can't tell anything about the passage as a whole right now, so I'm going to mark that one. If I look at number 2, the narrator describes the photos of Bombay's first great photographers as primarily inspiring the narrator to do what? The narrator describes the photos by Bombay's first great photographers. So what I'm going to do is I'm looking, and so when I start going through, I can start kind of scanning. When I grew up, great city, always there, metropolis, Bombay, just kind of scanning through. Marine Drive, grew up in Art Deco, Bombay style. Lo and behold, art, American style. You're just kind of scanning through. Then in reality, that Bombay was almost brand new when I knew it. What's more, my parents' construction firm of Merchant & Merchant had been prominent in its making. In the 10 years before my own coming into the world, the city had been a gigantic building site, as if it were in a hurry to become, as if it knew it had to provide itself in finished condition by the time I was able to start paying attention to it. No, I really think along such solipsistic lines, I am not over attached to history or Bombay. Me, I'm the under attached type. So as we're kind of scanning through these things, we're learning more about the character. Now, one of the things I want to tell you, just like I got to that word that I don't have a clue what it is, okay? And I'm not going to sit there, the word is solipsistic.
I don't know, I'm not a good reader.
Okay,
Should
solipsistic.
even try.
Solipsistic. Solipsistic. I don't know, okay? But so it says, I don't really think along such solipsistic lines, whatever it is. I'm not over attached to history. So basically, I don't have a clue what that word means. I don't need to spend time figuring it out. All I need to do is I can kind of use my context here. It says, no, I'm not over attached to history or Bombay. Me, I'm the under attached. So if it's talking about thinking about specific lines, you know, that may be the word that it means. I don't know. But just when you get to words that you don't know, just keep on going. So again, literary narrative, we've got passage as a whole questions, the narrator describes photos. Number 3 says in lines 25 to 31. That means I can just go directly to those lines. I don't have to worry about what's before it, what's after it. It says the narrator muses over, then rejects the notion that, okay? So muses over means, okay, they're really thinking over it and everything, but then they eventually reject the notion or reject the thought. So I'm going to go back to lines 25 to 31. And so we can see how, notice that we've got these we've got these line numbers to the side, okay? So I'm going to be going, now usually what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the whole paragraph. In reality, that Bombay was almost brand new. Construction firm, Merchant had been prominent in its making in the 10 years before my own coming into the world. City had been a big building site, so basically we know that before the person was born, it was basically empty. No construction, nothing going on. But then he says, and all of a sudden, you know, it was like it was a hurry to become, as if it had to be ready. It had to be completely built and ready by the time I got there, okay? But then basically that implies that he's thinking that these things all had to happen in a certain order, but then he says, no, I'm not really thinking about these solid whatever lines. I'm not over attached to history or Bombay. Me, I'm the under attached type. So if we look at that, look at the questions. The narrator muses over, then rejects the notion that A, Merchant played an important role in the building of Bombay. B, he started paying attention to Bombay at a young age. C, his anticipated birth was one of the causes of the rush to finish the building of Bombay. Or D, Bombay had been a giant building site in the years before he was born. So which of those, just based on that quick little look that we made? D. That we said, he said basically it was just a giant building site in the years before he was born. Okay? And so, so when we look, you know, so being able to look back, okay, so let's think about that for a minute. That was going to be something that we could answer from it, okay? But if we look at that question, it says that he thinks about it and then rejects the notion. So if we look back at that, in line 25, it does say, what's more, my parents' construction firm of Merchant & Merchant had been prominent in its making. So the construction company was something that was important in the making of Bombay. He says, in the 10 years before his own coming into the world, the city had been a gigantic building site. That was D that we just looked at. But what does he say? As if it were in a hurry to become, as if it knew it had to provide itself finished condition by the time I was able to start paying attention to it. So he's saying it's as if Bombay knew, hey, I gotta hurry up because this guy's coming, so I gotta get ready. But then he goes, no, I don't really think about it that way. So that's what they're talking about there. Okay, so when we look at what he originally thought and then rejected, that his anticipated birth was one of the causes of the rush to finish the building in Bombay. So just like, you know, the initial thing was to go, hey, well, yeah, he did think it was a gigantic building site, but he also thought that his parents' company played a role in the building, okay? There's nothing there about him paying attention to Bombay at a young age necessarily. I mean, all those things are actually, you know, things that he did do, but the thing that he thought one way and changed his thinking about, okay? So that's why we have to pay close attention to what the question is asking. Lines 32 through 43, the narrator uses the following literary devices. Alliteration. What is alliteration?
I know it's all.
I always think about alliteration as like la 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 la. So Lucy licks lollipops and la
Yeah,
la la.
I was
You know,
about to say
that's,
it's with like a bunch of stuff.
yeah,
that starts
it's
with the same.
alliteration is going to be the same sound at the beginning. You know and so that's why I always that la 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 always kind of helps me with alliteration because it's going
Yeah.
to make that same sound. What is illusion? Okay, it's not illusion with an I, but illusion. And then we have personification. What's personification?
When you make something.
When you create something into a character.
Yeah, you give an inanimate object
A personality.
personality, what's other
Human-like.
characteristics, yeah, human-like characteristics, whatever. What about simile?
You can use the same words like or as.
Like or as. Okay, so now I'm looking in 32 through 43. So again, I'm going real quick to 32 through 43. But let me confess that even as a child, I was insanely jealous of the city in which I was raised because it was my parents' utter love. They loved each other good. They loved me very good. And they loved her not so good. What are they calling Bombay? Her. So what is that going to be? Personification. Okay. So by looking at that, we looked at our answer choices. We said, hey, I know what these are. I don't have a clue what illusion is. I don't have to worry about that right now. Okay. Hopefully it'll be something that we'll be covering a little bit. But I know alliteration, I know I didn't hear the la 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 la. I didn't hear anything. I didn't see anything comparing this to like or as, but I did see personification. They were talking about the city as a person, okay? So that's what I'm talking about is as you kind of go through these, as it is used in line 9, the word sweep most nearly means, okay? When you talk about the word sweep, overwhelming victory, a wide-ranging search, complete removal, or a broad area, all of those are going to be definitions that could be used for the word sweep, but you've got to look at line 9 and figure out which one it's talking about. Again, lines 6 to 10. So there's going to be a lot of times where it tells you specifically where to look. Most of these are telling us, as in line 38, in the last paragraph, you know, so, but the main thing is like that first one, the passage as a whole, okay? So if you're doing read half, answer half, then you're gonna need to save that one to end, to read after you read, okay? So by looking at your questions will help you kind of as you're going through. And also to pick out which ones are going to be the easiest ones to answer first. Answer those that it tells you where specifically to go. If it's something that I have to do and answer as a whole, I'm going to get these that I can go specifically to the text and answer first, and then I'll worry about that one. Okay. So again, literary narrative, social sciences. This passage is adapted from Great Waters, an Atlantic Passage by Deborah Kramer, 2001. Okay. So this is talking about as the Kramer idles through the Sargasso Sea. We know that the Kramer is a boat, okay? So we know, and from the name of the passage, the Great Waters, an Atlantic Passage, we know this is a boat crossing the Atlantic, okay? Let's skip over that one. Then we can get to passage 3. This is where we have our paired passages, okay? So you can see this one is passage A, and then I have passage B. Notice that they're both by the same person. Sometimes they'll be by the same person, sometimes they'll be different. So it says passage A is adapted from the essay Just This Side of Byzantium by Ray Bradbury, 1975, which is the introduction to the later passage, Bradbury's 1957 novel Dandelion Wine. Okay, so basically passage A was written after passage B. Okay, so you're going to be looking at how are they similar, how are they different. So if you notice the questions, look at how the questions are going to be different. Okay, so it says questions 21 through 25 ask about passage A. Questions 26 and 27 ask about passage B. But then 28 through 30 ask about both passages. So in that situation, if you're having trouble with paired passages, do the individual questions and guess and move on the ones comparing the passages. Okay, so that's going to be helpful with that. And then finally we have, oh, that's science. Where's my last passage? There we go. Okay, passage 4, natural science. This passage is adapted from the article The Jaws That Jump by Adam Summers, 2006, by Natural History Magazine. Okay. Recently, I was reminded of just how powerful ants can be when inflicting damage on intruders. So we've got an article about ants. So we're going to probably be talking about characteristics of ants. We noticed that the title of it was Jaws That Jump. Okay, so we know that we're going to be talking about the ant's capability, something to do with its mouth. And so all of this is going to be about the characteristics of an ant. Okay. So again, when we're looking at these questions, primary purpose of the passage, what is the purpose? What's the author? Why did they write it? Why are they trying to share this information? Then it goes on, lines 73 through 75, 33, lines 81 to 82. The passage makes it clear that the main source of speed of the jaws. Again, that would be something where I'd go directly to the text. If I didn't remember it, I'd go back and go, where does it say? Talk about the speed of the jaws. What's the main purpose? Analogies. One main purpose in the last paragraph. Go to the last paragraph, line 31. So a lot of these are going to be super helpful because they do direct you to the passage. So as far as the reading goes, me personally, I do not think you need to take time reading every word for word in reading. If you do, you're going to eat up all your time reading and not have enough time putting answers. My recommendation is for the literary narrative to read your half and half and try to do that. For these other passages, what I would do is if you kind of skim it first to kind of have an idea, just like I did, okay, I'm dealing with ants, I'm talking about jaws, I'm talking about these different things, I have kind of a general idea, I've done a quick skim of everything. Then I'm going to go to the answers, and I'm gonna go to my questions, and I'm gonna go specifically, if it says go to line whatever, I'm going there and finding that answer. And so I'm using my questions to determine where I go in the passage. But then, I'm gonna save my main idea something or my big idea question till the end. So hopefully by the time I've answered all these other ones and I've gone here and found this answer, and gone here and found that answer, then I have a better understanding of what the passage is as a whole. And then I can kind of do another quick skim once I'm more familiar with the passage and I'm able to pick that information out better, okay? With English, read it word for word, because you've got to have the context, you've got to know what's coming before and after something to be able to make those grammatical changes. For reading, which it seems so super weird to say, read the English, but don't read the reading. Basically, the reading test is assessing the likelihood of how well you will do in a college level history course. Okay, so freshman history is basically what it's talking about, because that's what history, we read the passage and answer the questions based on what we've read in the passage. Okay, so that's what they're looking at. Can you read a passage and pick out the information from the passage? So, all right. So what we will do is we will continue talking about reading strategies. We'll talk about what types of questions there are. We'll talk about what types of information, what the questions will be based on the type of passage and things like that. So that's what we will continue with. So for this upcoming week, I would like you to practice with your, in the red book, do the first test, reading practice test, okay? Don't stress about your timing. My recommendation to you is do one a day. Set, if you want to set a timer, that's fine. But just say, hey, today I'm going to do the first one. I'm going to do literary narrative. Because right now what I want you to do is find which ones do you like better and which ones are you doing better score-wise, okay? Because that's also going to help you to know when you're attacking the real test, what do you want to do first? What's going to be faster and quicker for you to do, okay? Also, you can practice with skimming first, skimming it, or scanning for answers, or how do you do when you're reading the questions first and then going to look for the answer? Do you find that that's taking you more time? Are you more lost? Do you need to do a skim and then things like that, okay? So kind of practice with these things that we've talked about today as you do that practice test without really focusing on time. We'll focus on time a little more. Mm-hmm. Okay. Just that one. So like that test that we've been, the first test in the red book, now we've done the English, we've done the math of that same test. Now do the reading portion of that same first test. Okay, so go through it. After you do a section, go ahead and score it. And then we'll come back and talk about the rest of it. Or I guess we'll be meeting online next week. And maybe next week. Questions, comments, feeling overwhelmed yet? So when does everybody plan on taking the ACT?
I have no idea.
I'm planning on taking it in December.
I was gonna take it in December.